everyone, and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That is the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. This is Nick Wright, and you know what? It is officially Baker time in Cleveland, Ohio. We'll talk about that. Plus, are the Patriots in panic mode? The Giants' all-pro defensive tackle Damon Snacks Harrison joins us live in studio.
Snacks in the morning.
Snacks in the morning. No better
Always
time
a good
to have
time
them.
for snacks. Good to see him.
We'll start with a little Monday Night Football. This was a game. Bucs and Steelers, storylines for days. A lot of turmoil surrounding Pittsburgh all week, but it didn't matter on the field. Big Ben was lights out, completing 30 of his 38 passes for 353 yards and 3 touchdowns. Ryan Fitzpatrick had a tale of two halves. Fitzpatrick in the first, Fitzmagic in the second. His third straight game of at least 400 passing yards. He also had 3 costly interceptions, though. Bucs come up short. Steelers get their first win of the year.
You know what, we always say winning cures a lot of things, but I still think the biggest issue, if you will, was outside the locker room, people perceiving different things. I'm not saying we don't have issues. All teams have issues, and there's different things going on, but I think it was a little bigger than people than it really is.
We put ourselves in a bad spot, and they did a great job creating and forcing the turnovers, but for us, it was let's just go out there and play. Let's go out there and play and see what happens. And, we did that. We gave ourselves a chance, but weren't able to finish it.
All right, Cece, let's start with you. What did the Steelers show you by surviving what Tampa Bay had to offer last night, that comeback in the second half?
Yeah, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, in their great history, they've had a 20-point lead a number of times, never lost a 20-point lead. That was on the board last night. What did they show me? Regardless of how many points they score, when they face the better teams in the NFL, they're going to struggle defensively. Their cornerback play, their inability to be able to make big plays on a regular basis, I think it's going to come back to haunt them. Sometimes they get a vicious pass rush, then other times the quarterback has all day throw. So that, to me, was the most alarming thing, because they look like a team, one of the elite teams in the league, especially when they had a 3 turnovers given to them in the first half. It's going to be hard to beat one of the elite teams when you have that type of, especially
in a defensive score, not just 3 turnovers, but I mean, the other team throws an interception in the red zone and then throws another interception that is returned for a touchdown. Like, it would have been hard to lose typically that type of game. The Steelers came close.
So even as well as they were playing, I watched the whole game, stayed with it. I had a feeling Tampa Bay was going to come back. And they did, and still had
You had that feeling after the way you saw them play in the first half?
Because I know Pittsburgh's defense. Yeah. I've been complaining about Pittsburgh's defense for a long time. People tend to talk about the offense because of the personalities, because of the contract holdout. But if we're going to keep our standard for Pittsburgh exactly like Pittsburgh's standard, which is to win a championship, then we should look at that defense, wonder, is that defense good enough to win a championship? And that's what I saw when you seen Tampa Bay be able to come back in that second half and make it a close game.
Listen, Pittsburgh's passing game is as good as it's been, even without Le'Veon Bell. It's almost like because they don't have Le'Veon Bell to rely on in the running game, that it's just Big Ben all the time. Juju's turned into an excellent player. You obviously had the really cool Vance McDonald play yesterday where he mush faces Chris Conte up the sideline. AB didn't have a huge game, but he had the one great play where he made Brent Grimes look his age for the first time this season. But it was all muted by the fact that it's the defense and the penalties. The penalties for Pittsburgh, this is a new thing. In Mike Tomlin's 12 years there had only been one time this team was in the top 10 in the league in penalties. They are the most penalized team in football right now by a wide margin. And the defensive struggles, color me confused on this, because they don't have terrible defensive personnel. Now, Bart Scott a few days ago made the point with the type of defense they like to play. It's very important that they have middle linebacker play and safety play. And maybe that's the real issue, because they have good defensive linemen. I like their linebackers. Joe Hayden is at least one quality corner, but John Bostic and Vince Williams on the inside of the linebacking core have not been able to fill in for Ryan Shazier even combined. And they spent a first-round pick on a safety who looks like a rookie right now.
Yes.
So maybe that's the answer, because I look at a team that's got Bud Dupree, T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, Stephen Tuitt, Joe Hayden, and I say they should at least be an average defense. And if people didn't watch the game, they should know, yeah, they forced 3 first-half turnovers. 2 of those were given to them. Ryan Fitzpatrick threw lasers to the defense. It wasn't some great defensive play. It would have been a gaffe not to pick those balls off.
So what does this say now about the Steelers? They did rack up all these penalties. They do have questions on their defense. They also came away with the win. Does that ease your concerns about this team at all?
No, because of the turnovers. It's hard to lose a game when you win that turnover margin the way that they won it. No, it doesn't ease my mind, because good football teams don't have 3 weeks in a row 12 penalties. What is it? 12 penalties, 12 penalties, 13 penalties.
Is that on Mike Tomlin?
Well, you can't blame it all on the coach. It's poor fundamentals. Now, last night, it's a sloppy field. Typically, when you have a sloppy field, you're going to see more clutching and grabbing. So typically, in a sloppy field, I can make more excuses. But you can't make excuses for personal fouls. 8 major fouls. Like, you're not going to be able to. 8 times you're going to give the team 10 or 15 yards? No, you're not going to be able to win. So, no, it didn't alleviate my concern. I know the way Mike Tomlin has coached. So there's no way that Mike Tomlin this offseason said, you know something, guys, we're going to play edgy football. Last year, 20th in penalties. Mike Tomlin, throughout his career, one of the least penalized teams.
Always one of the least penalized teams.
This team, at this juncture of the season, now we'll just have to keep our eyes on it. Is this going to be the theme, what they did in the first 3 games? Will that continue? Because teams will get a lot better, and those penalties are out of character for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
When you look at it, if you hadn't seen the games and you just know 3 games in what everyone's record is in the NFL, how good teams are, what the preemptive power rankings are, and you say, okay, you've played 3 games, on the road at Cleveland, home for Kansas City, on the road at Tampa. 1-1-1 is actually not terrible, all things considered. Cleveland's better than a lot of people anticipated it would be. Kansas City's far better than a lot of people anticipated it would be. And Tampa, until last night, was the story of the league. So you're at even money, essentially, going into your next 13 weeks. So from a record perspective, they win next week. They're probably going to be first place in the AFC North. But it is, to me, the bigger concerns of, are they going to have a consistent running game at any point this year? Meaning, is Le'Veon Bell going to come back? Because the time of possession can help minimize the lack of a defense. And what can they do? Because I don't think this Steelers team has to have a top 8 defense, but they can't have a bottom 10 defense. And right now, that's what it's looking like. How can they get to just an average defense? So I know Steelers fans this morning are like, you got to be kidding us. We got our first win of the year, and you guys are talking about the deficiencies. Well, the Steelers are graded on a different curve than a lot of teams, not just because of the history, but because of the preseason expectations. This was one of the 5 or 6 Super Bowl favorites across the league, and even last night, they didn't quite look like it.
It doesn't look like Le'Veon Bell is coming back. It looks like now the team is looking at trade offers for him.
No. I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
I wouldn't
well,
say
how
he's
about
not.
In the next couple weeks?
I would say right now it's on the board that he could be traded. But he's going to play football somewhere this year. He's
Correct.
Not going to just give away the year.
Correct. I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't look like he's coming back to the Steelers in the next couple weeks. Connor did not look great, save for that last run that he had. Where do you think there's more problems on this team, with their running game right now or with their defense?
I wouldn't be worried about their running game. They ran the ball at the end of the game against a stout Tampa Bay defense. When they needed to run the ball, everyone in the stadium, everyone in the television audience knew they were going to run it. They ran the football. Also, they had wholesale substitutions on their line, on that right side.
David DeCastro out for the
game. And Marcus Gilbert out. Like, you're missing really good football players. So, no, not worried about the running game. And also, man, Vance McDonald, that dude can run. Him and Jesse James, and James Washington, the wide receivers they have, Juju Smith-Schuster is for real. So, I don't have to be able to run the ball as much. I got an all-time great quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger.
He played really well last night.
You know, so the defense, all they got to do is be able to hold themselves. They don't need to be a top 10 defense. If they're in the top half of the league, 16 defenses, they're going to be top 20, they're going to be okay. And red zone defense. How good are they going to be there? If people can give up yards, if you have a lead like that, they're going to be okay. So there are a lot of good things going on in Pittsburgh, but if we're going to keep the Super Bowl aspirations, we got to keep it real.
And the last 8 quarters of football, their opposing quarterback, Pat Mahomes, a game ago, threw for 6 touchdowns. Yet last night, Ryan Fitzpatrick threw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, week 1, Tyrod Taylor couldn't get anything going. The only reason that game was a tie was because of Big Ben. Since then, Big Ben's played well. The passing game has been elite.
Yeah.
The defense looks, we talk all about how bad the Chiefs' defense is. It was one of the best teams in the AFC. The Steelers' defense last 2 weeks has looked on par with them. That's problematic for any team in the league right now.
All right, the Pittsburgh Steelers picking up their first win. We mentioned the Cleveland Browns coming up. What can we expect from Baker Mayfield now that he's the man in Cleveland? That's next. This is First Things First. All right, we're going to get to Baker Mayfield and his first start in just a second. But first, Antonio Brown may have had a rough week, but he did not have a rough game. Catches the pass, scores the touchdown.
I mean, this is just a quick smoke route, right? See Brent Grimes playing off him?
Seeing they're in cover 1, knowing the blitz, knowing they may not have it picked up, like the matchup outside. AB does a great job when the ball's in the air. You can't see it, but he comes inside just enough to get inside on Grimes because Grimes doesn't have help inside. This is why he's a special player.
All right, same game. Fitzy finds Mike Evans for the touchdown. Evans catches it on his back. It's nice, but this reaction from Fitzpatrick even better.
Oh, Fitzy loves playing football, man. I'll give him credit. He enjoys himself out there.
Look at that. Look at that. Look at the eyes.
Man.
Yeah, he's got amnesia. He forgot about the earlier part of the game.
Yeah, really.
What happened? I don't know. Hey, what you talking about, Willis?
And now this play.
Back to the Steelers. Vance McDonald, the ultimate stiff arm, just throws Chris Conner to the ground while on his way to the end zone.
Now, this is one of the nastiest stiff arms that I've seen. All right, this right here. When you go in and watch the film the next day with your teammates, man, you talking about bad. You talking about humiliating. Conte after this one took it to the house. He said, something. He stiff armed me so bad, my knee hurt.
I'm done for the day. What's that like in the film room for Chris Conte?
Oh, that's brutal. Hey, Brad, what you doing? Were you tackling? Buy a ticket if you're going to go for a ride.
I mean.
Man, you straight, homie, straight arm, right to the chin.
Lines.
But then he got jumped over, too. That was unbelievable.
All right, moving on. The Browns quarterback of the future will actually start now. Baker Mayfield named the team's starter, not surprising. He'll be the Browns' 30th starting quarterback since 1999. The #1 overall pick came in last week against the Jets, rallied the Browns to their first win in 635 days. He will take on an 0-3 Raiders team on Sunday. Said Baker yesterday, "I'm living my dream and I wouldn't have it any other way." Chris, what will Baker's biggest challenge be?
I think the biggest challenge for young quarterbacks is trying to create an identity that they can play with for a long period of time. Baker Mayfield has all the talent, all the attributes, the intangibles. He loves football. He's a student of the game. A photographic memory, some of the coaches in the scouting process said. He's a leader, a born leader. He's a high achiever at every level. He's also faced a lot of adversity. Like no quarterback that we've seen transferred twice as a walk-on.
Walk-on
I mean,
twice.
you don't see that in the great lineage of quarterbacks that we've had. So in doing that, what he has done, though, he's made a lot of big plays throwing the ball down the field. And he's also been a very, very good athlete. He's not going to be a great athlete playing in the NFL. So what he's going to have to be able to do is, and Trent Dilford spoke to this on Colin's show yesterday, and is he going to be a thrower of the football and trying to make big plays down the field like Matthew Stafford? Or is he going to be surgeon-like and just hit you with 1,000 paper cuts, the short passing game? Because we know he can drive the ball down the field. And a lot of young quarterbacks, they fall in love with that. I'm going to drive it down the field. But as we can see, Aaron can do that Aaron Rodgers, but he can also dink and dunk you, which leaves you in a pool of blood. Tom Brady is the best at that, but when he needs to drive the ball down the field. So for me, how do I win football games and create an identity where I'm a surgeon? I'm going to throw the ball to the people that are open as quick as possible because that's the most effective way. And I can do that for a long period of time compared to I'm going to try to scramble around. I'm going to try to be like Russell Wilson. And he's not the athlete that Russell Wilson is. And it will catch up to him in the NFL. So I just hope in trying to win games that he understands, man, I want to be a surgeon quarterback compared to a guy just a thrower and a big play quarterback.
He's not only not the athlete Russell Wilson is, we have no way to know if he's going to have the elite durability Russell Wilson has had. Nobody knows that until, like, Russell Wilson's been dinged a lot, but for how often he's been hit over the last few years, that he hasn't suffered a major injury, that's, as you would say, sometimes guys are just touched by God a little bit. Like, his body's just built for it. When you were talking about, is he going to be a thrower or a surgeon, and the thrower example you used Matt Stafford, the surgeon example I thought you were going to use is the guy people talk about with him a lot, which is Drew Brees.
Yeah, Drew Brees is a whole nother level. Drew Brees, I believe, is in a class by himself as far as the guys who took advantage of their overall body. Drew Brees, he's not an athlete like Russell Wilson, but in talking to Drew Brees and spending time doing the game this weekend, Drew Brees believes he has elite feet. And he believes getting his feet in position allows him to be very, very accurate. That's the part that Baker, that will make him a surgeon, if he continues to work on his foot action.
And that's what I wanted to talk about, because the reason I bring up Brees is not just because Brees has talked about Baker, not just because they have the comps. Brees last year sets the all-time completion percentage record at 72%. This year he's at 80, which is comedy. That's like Texas 7-on-7. I mean, when there's no pass rush, that's not supposed to be able to happen at any level. That doesn't happen in college football, much less in the NFL. Baker, obviously, if I'm Baker Mayfield, I'm happy this year with 60%. Like, as a rookie player with the Cleveland Browns, especially as that offensive line seems to be a work in progress. But the reason that I am so bullish on Baker Mayfield is not because of the half of football we saw him play. It's because of something you verbalized to me, C, when we were talking this weekend, which is almost going to sound cliche, but you said, man, some people are just born to do things.
Yeah.
You're like nobody bats an eye when there's a kid that is a prodigy violinist. And it's just like, man, I don't know why. He was just here, put on the planet to play the violin. Like, and in basketball, we actually don't bat an eye. People say, listen, man, LeBron's worked really hard, and I'm not saying Baker's LeBron at all, but the guys that you just say, he was put on the planet. There's a reason that he's 6'8". There's a reason that he's 275 and jump like that. He was put on the planet to do this. I found it really interesting that is what you were saying about Baker. Like, some guys, despite physical limitations or whatever it is, they were put here to do something, and that's what it feels like with Baker as far as leadership and playing this position.
But why do you see that in Baker Mayfield and you didn't see it in Johnny Manziel or Tim Couch or Brady Quinn or any of these guys that we thought were heralded to be the next big thing in Cleveland?
There is no science to it, and that's why we'll always have the draft speculations. We'll always have the evaluations, because we know the attributes that we want, but we don't know what a guy will do when he gets hit right on his chin. Now, given the NFL and their new rules, you're going to be able to play football and not get hit. But that used to be one of the tests about a quarterback that we didn't know. How does he do with pressure? How does he do with being the face of a franchise? How does he do with being football's the only thing in his life? There is no class. It's football all day, every day. Does that bring them up, or can they not handle the pressure? So all those things that we've seen. The thing about Baker Mayfield was, I watched Baker from afar before the Oklahoma-Ohio State game, and he knew I was watching him. Baker Mayfield went out of his way, stopped what he was doing, came over to me and introduced himself and said, I'm Baker Mayfield. I said, I know. I'm sitting here looking at the groceries. I want to be, as I prepare for the draft, I want to be like, man, this guy's 6'1". I want to look at it. He said, and I went to introduce myself as Chris Carr. He said, no, I know exactly who you are. I allowed him to go back on the field. Then I went to talk to the support staff, and they talked about what he could do as a leader. They talked about his brain, the amount of information, how he was consumed with football. And then I saw the game. And then I saw him, which a lot of people took it as something bad. I saw him plant that flag in Ohio State Stadium now. They've been playing good football there, Nick, for over 120 years. There's only a few people. I saw John Elway scramble to his left one time at Ohio Stadium and throw the ball all the way back crossfield when I was a youngster to beat Ohio State. It's only a few guys been able to do things like that. So for me, I took note of it. So it's some other little things that you see and you just feel. It's secretariat. I don't know it, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
In Baker, that's what I see.
Saturday's college football doubleheader on Fox starting in the Big Ten with number 14 Michigan taking on Northwestern, then number 11 Washington hosting 20th-ranked BYU. It all kicks off Saturday at 4 Eastern on Fox and the Fox Sports app.
That BYU-Washington game should be good now. Washington bouncing back after that early season disappointment to Auburn. Should be a good game, man.
You guys want to go viral?
Yes.
Let's go viral. LeBron James was at Lakers Media Day yesterday, and it seemed like the Cavs have already forgotten him.
Hey, it's Cavs Media Day. Hey, Channing, whose locker did you take? Come on, man. Some dude? Wow.
Channing Frye got there early.
Yes.
And took what I imagine is the most luxurious locker they have, the corner locker LeBron.
It looks
used to
empty,
have.
too.
Dibs on it. I got it. I'm one of the only old guys they got around this place.
Really?
Yeah, that's cool. He's a funny guy.
He's a funny guy, man.
I'm glad he went to Cleveland. We would have never known how funny he was.
Absolutely. He and Richard Jefferson, the podcast they were doing, or they are doing, I should say. No, he's a great locker room chemistry guy. And you saw when he left Cleveland in the trade, some of those little locker room issues started to bubble up again. When he first got there, he got them all together, started doing team dinners, a lot of stuff they hadn't been doing. He's a great glue locker room guy.
Well, now he's got a great locker.
He's got a great locker. Yeah, good
Time
point.
now for stories to start your morning. Ohio State will be without star defensive end Joey Bosa on Saturday when they take on Penn State. Urban Meyer said Bosa will be out a few more weeks after having abdominal surgery. See, how much will this impact the Buckeyes?
It's going to impact them. I mean, they got a couple other players to be able to fill in, but you're talking about one of the best football players in college football, not defensive players. Not the best defensive end. He's the top 5 pick in the NFL draft. He's a guy that hadn't had durability issues. Man, I've been knowing the kid since he was about 8 years old. Now, he was born to play football. We talked about Baker Mayfield. This kid, they're going to miss him.
I think up until the injury, Nicky Bosa had been the best player in college football. I really believe that. He was making impact plays every single week, forcing fumbles, forcing turnovers. Can they overcome it? Yes. But this is, I think, their toughest regular season game of the year coming up this weekend. And be without their best player, that's tough.
Yeah, Fox is trying to, when I call games, not to kind of predict what the injury is going to be. I think this might be a sports hernia.
Sports hernia?
Yeah, they talking about lower.
Well, Fox is trying to get you to not predict injuries. You're 0 for 2.
Exactly.
No, I'm 2 for 2.
You're 2 for 2 on predicting the correct one.
Not
You're
0 for 2 on listening to Fox.
Preventing yourself.
I need to talk to my teacher.
Hold on, let me quote Cris. I know we're not supposed to speculate on injuries, but let me speculate on exactly what happened.
Ruptured Achilles.
But you were right.
Speaking of this.
Moving on to the NFL now, Dolphins defensive end William Hayes tore his ACL Sunday trying to avoid a roughing the passer penalty while sacking Derek Carr. Nick, is the new sack rule actually bad for the league?
Man, Monday Night Football, we saw it seemed like the referee's first reaction was, if a quarterback gets hit, we'll throw a flag, then we'll discuss if it was actually a penalty. They ended up picking a couple up. This is tragic. This guy doing his job, doing it well, in the last moment realizing, I can't fall on him.
Trying to follow the rules.
And now his career's altered. Like, I mean, I'm not.
Absolutely.
Guys come back from this. I get it. But this will cost him money. This will cost him This is awful, man.
This is going to hurt a good Dolphins team. They allow him to play defensive tackle in their nickel situations because they got Cameron Wake, they got Quinn on the outside. This is going to affect them going forward, and a player trying to adjust to the new rules. When the NFL changed the no hitting above the head rule, they wanted defensive backs to adjust. It was a little easier than defensive linemen and linebackers adjusting to landing on the quarterback. That's something we've done since the beginning of
And that
football.
was a critical change that had to happen.
Yes.
This seems over the top.
All right, the Josh Rosen era in Arizona has officially begun. Rosen will get the start week 4 against the Seahawks. The Cardinals are currently dead last in the league, averaging just 6.7 points per game. They've yet to get a win. See, was this the right time to make a switch for the Cardinals?
Man, you got to. You got to move. 0-3. I mean, there's only 2 ways that Sam really keeps the job. Number one is that the team starts off at least 500, 2-1, even 1-2 at this point. They probably still be playing
with some offensive punch to go along with it.
Man, and if they were scoring points.
Yes.
All right. So your record and how does the offense look in both these cases? Not very good. You got to go with the kid. It's time to see Rosen.
I think week 4 is the perfect time to start him. Unfortunately for Josh, they started him with a few minutes left in week 3. They're like, hey, execute this comeback. We saw Baker do it.
Yeah.
And so that was unfortunate for him. I do find this interesting. Aside from the Jets and what they did with Darnold, every team said, no. We're taking the long view with our rookie first-round pick. It's week 4, and all of them are starting except for Lamar. Every single rookie first-round pick is going to start in week 4 except for Lamar Jackson. They all are into the fire now.
All right, finally, Jimmy Garoppolo's season is officially over after suffering a torn ACL. It happened Sunday in the Niners' loss to the Chiefs. KC's linebacker Justin Houston said that the injury was Jimmy G's fault and that he should have stepped out of bounds. So you said the same thing yesterday. What do you make of Houston's comments?
Absolutely. It's what any logical NFL player would be saying. Right now, we're at a critical point as far as the NFL and its overall popularity, because we understand changing the rules as far as hitting the quarterbacks, but you can't make the quarterback not a football player. Jimmy Garoppolo tried to act like he's a football player. You're not a football player in the NFL anymore. That's why we saw all the penalties last night. Take advantage of all the rules, all the protections. You're supposed to be one of the smartest guys on the field, right? That's what they say about the quarterback. Go out of bounds. Utilize the rules to your benefit. They're doing everything to be able to protect you. We want our quarterback to be tough, but we want him to be smart before being tough. All right? You're not going to win any points in the locker room by going back into the field of play and taking on the defensive back. No, it was an idiotic play.
And this is, you know what that reminded me of? Something RG3 used to do, which was RG3 would get to the sideline, see the defenders let up because he was by the sideline, and steal a few extra yards. And he did that, and then a few times he got lit up doing that. Sometimes it was a late hit, sometimes it wasn't. But newsflash, your body doesn't feel better because a flag came. Like, oh, okay, I got crushed there, but it was a 15-yard penalty. My body will recuperate better. No, it's still a hit. And Jimmy G was making a beeline to the sideline. And then at the last second, as defenders were letting up, said, oh, I can steal a few extra yards. This wasn't even the Josh Allen play where he hurdles the guy, where that was 3rd and 10. And even if that was a reckless play, at least there is a tangible thing you're gaining. Even if the risk v. reward is skewed, I'm trying to get this first down. There was no reason for that. And that he didn't, the audience watching that needs to know, he blew his ACL before anyone touched him. He blew his ACL on the plant to go back into the field, and then he got hit.
And I do believe that, man, part of doing business in sports, you're going to get hurt. There are going to be times that you can't describe. It's just your time, and you plant and you get hurt. But if he had just gone out of bounds, he wouldn't have had to plant. So people, they're saying, oh, it was just his time. No, it wasn't. It wasn't his time. It might have been another time. I could understand guys. Deshaun Watson.
Just dropping back in practice. It happened.
Couldn't avoid it. Teddy Bridgewater. Just dropping back in practice. Unavoidable. This was avoidable.
That to me, sorry to interrupt you, but that's such an important point, because because some injuries are unavoidable, that the ones that are avoidable, you can't. It's rolling the dice an extra time you don't have to. It's you're playing this sport, and you know sometimes I'm going to get unlucky, sometimes I'm going to get rolled up, sometimes my body's just going to give out. But if you are doing something outside of really what your job description is, and Jimmy Garoppolo's job description is not to fight for an extra yard on the sideline in week 3 of the season, and now we're looking at an extended period.
He already had the first down. Right. There was no advantage to going back into the field.
And the Niners were actually executing an interesting little comeback there against Kansas City.
Right. And this is going to now leave us with where does that leave the 49ers?
He got plenty of time. If y'all got one of them apps or something, y'all might be able to find him. He got plenty of time.
Okay. Well,
dinner dates, hey, ring him up.
Not exactly where I was going, but definitely an interesting.
Well, I mean, he hurt. He ain't going to be throwing the ball.
You're right. You're right. That's.
I mean, he's supposed to be a good-looking guy. I mean, how he chooses his dates and stuff.
Social life more than the Niners.
Jimmy G, get busy now.
We are going to move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers now. We learned this week that the team's open to trading their star running back, the running back who has yet to run anywhere for the team as he's still holding out. According to a report, the New York Jets reached out to Pittsburgh. No offer was officially made, though. With Bell essentially being a one-year rental, teams might be hesitant while trying to acquire Le'Veon. So, CC, should the Steelers move on from Bell? Is it finally time?
No, absolutely not. For what? I wouldn't give away my season. I mean, I believe Pittsburgh is going to be one of the better teams in the AFC. I believe potentially they are the best team in the AFC if they get L. Bell back. Why would I allow him to do what he wants to do? All right? He's property of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I gave him a tender offer. All right? He hadn't signed that yet. He's going to show up because he's not going to give away this year. And I'm not going to help anyone else out in football. The Jets, unless they have a ridiculous offer, but there's two teams out there I got my eyes on, and it's not to trade him to. It's because I'm going to need him to beat these teams. Jacksonville. Look at L. Bell, how he does against Jacksonville. New England. What did Matt Patricia do to New England? He sent them running backs and them wide receivers on them shallow crosses so those linebackers who couldn't cover them. Now, if I'm going to have to face those two teams, why would I give away an asset that I have the rights to? So after this season, he's going to move on his own. But the Pittsburgh Steelers start the season winning a championship. Connor is a good replacement player. Maybe next year he's ready to take that role. But L. Bell is going to be part of the Pittsburgh Steelers. If he wants to play football this year, he's going to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers because I'm not going to turn in my Super Bowl aspirations just because he's not happy.
There's only one way I would trade L. Bell, again, barring some Khalil Mack-esque offer, which is not going to come for a one-year L. Bell or Le'Veon Bell rental. The only way I would trade him is if it's the rare player-for-player trade. I'm not trading Le'Veon Bell for future picks when I'm trying to win a Super Bowl right now. But I would bring up a trade that I think's interesting if the two players are amenable to it. And that's Le'Veon Bell and Earl Thomas swapping teams. That we talked about the Steelers, where their need is. In the secondary, on defense, Earl is still a great player. The Seahawks, I know they drafted Rashad Penny. Right now, they need help in the backfield, and it looks like they are going to move on from Earl Thomas. That's a trade I would listen to, because at least you can argue there, while our offense will be getting worse with not having Le'Veon Bell, our defense will be getting markedly better. But I can't trade Le'Veon Bell for even a second-round pick because I'm trying to win a championship right now.
But, guys, explain this to me, because I don't understand it. If he hasn't showed up yet, why would he show up before the 10th? I understand that. He has to show up by the 10th game in order for the team to accrue this actual season. So if he hasn't showed up by week 3...
But they could use him by... So let's just assume that
What's his incentive to show up? I mean, he doesn't care clearly about the money.
Jenna,
so
but his incentive to show up is at week 10.
Week 10.
So that's by week 10, they're not going to be eliminated from the playoffs. They're still going to have the 6 weeks in the season and the playoff stretch. Like, I'm assuming at this point he's not showing up until week 10. Like, you don't usually skip the first 3 games and then come back week 6. I think, Chris, you're assuming it's probably going to be week 10. That still drastically helps their ability to beat Jacksonville, New England. I would add match points with Kansas City. Whomever you play in the playoffs, I think they can.
Right. There's no advantage to him being out past week 10.
Right.
We know what the rule is, so we know he's going to show up at least at week 10. So that's easy to understand. People will be like, after week number 1, was he going to show up this week? I wouldn't expect him to show up until week number 10. He told his offensive lineman he would be there week number 1. So the reason why I don't think he's going to be there until week number 10 is because he delivered a message through his agent that he was worried about the toll on his body and the carries the Steelers are going to put on him. To me, that means I'm going to show up at the last possible minute,
Yes.
and then that will be week number 2.
But do either of you have any concerns that it took them 3 weeks to get their first win without Lev Bell? You think they can fly through 10 weeks and be fine in a great position with Connor?
It's not that I think they can fly through. It's can they be alive? And can the Steelers still be? I don't think that division has a great team in it. And I think they, without Le'Veon Bell, will beat Baltimore this weekend and be tied for first place in the division after this weekend, or in first place in the division because they have the tie after this weekend. So if they had lost last night, right, and after 6 weeks they were 0-4, 0-5-1, then yeah, okay, like, doesn't matter when he comes back, our season's over, then I would potentially trade him. I still think the Steelers can win the Super Bowl this year, but I think their chances of doing that are drastically handicapped if Le'Veon Bell is not on their team once the playoffs start.
Do you think teams should go out and try to get Le'Veon Bell or try to offer up something for him?
I mean, you should try to, but I'm a hold true to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, if I'm the Jets, yeah, why wouldn't you? You have all that cap space. Get the player this year. You can't sign him till this summer. So yes, I like the facts of the Jets trying to be aggressive and to get a running back to help out your franchise quarterback. He would look great here in New York City with the Jets. I don't like the Seattle trade because I don't think he fits into their cap and going forward. Is Seattle and John Snyder willing to pay a running back that kind of money? Well, they let rid of Marshawn Lynch because he wanted more money. That's the reason why he retired. It wasn't because he didn't want to play football. He wanted more money there.
My question with the Seattle thing is, if it's not for a long term, if it's just for the Earl's leaving after this year anyway, for both of these teams, it's an expiring asset.
Yeah, I would much rather get the draft pick.
Okay.
Where Seattle is in their rebuild, they need the draft pick. It's more important. They're not a Super Bowl caliber team if they add L. Bell. So the draft pick's more important to them.
More valuable than having 13 or 12 games from Le'Veon Bell.
It's a good conversation. All right, coming up, is Gronk the problem with the Patriots offense? That's next on First Things First. Back here on a very rainy Tuesday morning in New York City. First Things First, we're joined by former head coach Eric Mangini. Morning, Coach. Good to have you back.
Morning.
We're talking some Patriots. It is not a secret the Patriots' offense has been bad this year. It is a secret why Belichick wears cutoff sweatshirts. But let's focus on just the offense for now, at least. New England ran just 47 offensive plays on Sunday, their fewest since 2010, with Tom Brady throwing his fewest passing yards on the road since 2009. Conventional thought was that opponents would focus solely on Gronk. But Tom Brady thinks that actually might be the root of the problem.
Yeah, it's really been, 3 weeks in a row where he's gotten the majority of the coverage focused on him, and I think if I was a defensive coach, I'd be focusing my attention on him too. If Gronk's going to get coverage, it gives other players opportunities, and at certain times we've done a good job with that, and then last night I just didn't think we did a good job with it at all.
Coach, is Tom Brady right that the Patriots haven't taken advantage of defenses basically focusing on Gronk?
Well, he's right that it's happened and it's going to continue to happen until they establish that someone else can be a threat. And one of the things that they'll do really well is say, okay, we've assessed this. This has been what's been effective for us in the past when they've taken away Gronk, and this is how we're going to try to create some opportunities. They do need to be able to capitalize on that, because when you're pushing that much coverage to a tight end, there should be a lot of opportunities with the backs. There should be a ton of opportunities outside with the wide receivers. And now it's a function of those guys being able to get open, and haven't seen enough of that over the past 3 games.
Coach, let's look at this from a defensive perspective. As I'm sure, as defensive coach, you might say, I'd love to just take away the other team's best player, double him every time. But there's a reason teams typically don't do that. Can you explain a little more in depth what that opens up the rest of the field? I know you said backs and wide receivers, but specifically what doubling Gronk and then playing the rest of the Pats essentially 9 on 10 should open up for the rest of the offensive players?
Well, it's also who you double them with. Is it a safety and a linebacker? Is it 2 defensive backs? How are you getting that point? And then if you have any kind of movement, which New England's not a big motion team, they're not a big shifting team, but when you start adding movement and a guy moves across the formation, the double team changes, the relationship of the double team changes. If you take Gronk and put him outside in the number 1 position, now if you're trying to work with a linebacker, that linebacker's got to walk out of the box, which opens up some things. So I would imagine you may see some more creative formations out of New England over the next couple weeks to make sure if they're going to double team them, they're putting that double team in the most awkward position possible or the most vulnerable position possible. And then now what are they going to do with the other guys? And sometimes you can leave Gronk in to block, free release the back, isolate him on the linebacker. Now you've got 2 guys doubling a guy who's blocking, which should open up things in the passing game as well.
Brian Billick used to always talk to me as far as offensive football. If you're going to be a number 1 receiver, you must force the defense to double team you or at least play cover 2, because that's another way of putting 2 guys in your area and not allowing free release off the line of scrimmage down the field. So Gronk has done his job. It's New England's job now. Sometimes you got to be able to put that guy, the number 1 guy, you got to put him in the primary decoy position. And if I was New England, I would move him outside the numbers because it would make the defense. You would have to indicate to me what you're going to do, and then I would pick and choose how I'm going to do it. They play cover 2, which is the easiest way to be able to slow Gronk down. If they move him outside the numbers, then New England has to be able to run the ball because they only got 7 people in the box. As far as the individual matchups that they've had now when they double-team Gronk, guys aren't winning. They're not winning those individual matchups. Brady's not going to throw the guys under the bus, but what he is saying is defenses are taking Gronk away, and we haven't been real effective in the other guys. When I'm looking to them to get open, they haven't been able to get open. It's a pretty easy to be able to see what's going on with New England.
And New England, there's a lot of times where it looks like it's motion. So they'll take the back, and it looks like he's motioning out of the backfield, but it's not. It's really a shift. He walks out, or he goes out, and then he gets set, and Tom assesses the defense. So you can do the same thing with the tight end, where you put him out in that one spot where Cris is talking about, assess how are they going to double-team Gronk, are they double-teaming Gronk on this play, and then motion him back in to get him to whatever spot you want to get him into, or you have 2 plays, one where he's out there, and then the second one where you bring him back in based off of what you see.
And everything that coach is saying, they might not call the play, but what they will do is motion and shift and decide what the defense is going to do, and then they call the play. So people thinking that Josh Gordon is going to be able to do all that, he's not. So they got a number of problems. Like, as if they're going to play Josh, they have to put him in a stationary position. He's not going to be able to go motion, and Brady's going to have to tell him what to do. So then, do they want to run their offense that way, or do they want to run it with the variety and the option routes, which they've run it and had a lot of success since Josh has been the offensive coordinator?
Not Josh Gordon, but when Edelman gets back, doesn't that change a lot of things with Gronk?
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday, having those 2 threats inside, where if you want to push the coverage of Gronkowski and you want to isolate Edelman, and you've got a slot receiver who can read away from coverage, it's huge. And they've missed that, and they've missed it a lot. Now you throw in the back out of the backfield. Now you've got 3 potential threats inside, and it should really open up a ton of things outside that they should take advantage of, or could take advantage of.
And I know we've talked a lot about Brandon Cooks, their decision to not bring Brandon Cooks back this year when he was under contract, under relatively cheaply under contract. Now they traded a 31st pick of the draft for him. They got the 23rd pick of the draft back for him. So you understand the value of it. But we've spent a lot of time talking about how good he's been with the Rams and what the Patriots are missing. A guy we haven't spent enough time talking about is another guy they don't have anymore, in Dion Lewis. And Dion Lewis and what he does as a receiver out of the backfield. I know James White can do some of that, but Dion Lewis had been their best pass-catching running back. Feels to me like they miss him in addition with the Edelman suspension.
Yeah, they wouldn't miss him. He had a tremendous season last year. 800 yards rushing, tremendous weapon out of the backfield. They made his career. He wasn't that kind of football player at multiple stops around the NFL. So like New England, they find someone else's trash, they clean it up and everything, and he was tremendous. The reason why they haven't been able to get that productivity is because with that draft pick, they draft Sony Michel. Sony Michel had some injury problems, so I would say Sony Michel is probably 3 or 4 weeks behind what his football development would have been if he didn't have the knee problems.
You and I were talking about this earlier. You know, what's his name?
Rob Gronkowski.
Completely. Gronk was on the trade block for the most part. The Patriots were considering trading him. It was back during the draft when they had already lost Brandon Cooks. What would their options have been knowing Edelman's already out for 4 weeks? You know it, I know it, opposing defenses know it. He's their number one target across the board.
My question that what Jen and I were discussing is, knowing Cooks is gone, Amendola's gone, Dion Lewis is gone, why at the draft, when Gronk's under a good contract, when Gronk evidently wants to play with no one but Tom Brady, why would Gronk be on the trade block?
Okay, well, let's look at it from where it was. He wanted a new contract at that point. He wasn't going to OTAs. He's missed 10 games in the last 2 years. He was making a lot of noise. So whether or not they would have gone through with it, you know, we don't know. But it sends a pretty strong message.
This is how we're going to do business, though.
Yeah, where it sends a message like, oh, okay, you want a new contract? You want to sit out OTAs? Go ahead to Detroit to this rebuilding project. See how that works out for the rest of your career. And suddenly the contract gets reworked and everybody's happy.
So you think it might have been a bluff?
I think if the compensation was right, they probably would have done it, but they
just like every other player that's an accomplished player except Brady, they've moved on from. So it would have been exactly what they've done with everyone else except Brady, coach.
And Bill and Matt Patricia are pretty tight, so I'm sure they could have got to the point where, you know, they were talking about it in a serious way that could have moved forward, but it sends a really strong message to a guy who's trying to take a stand. And it calls your bluff. It says, okay, we're all in. Are you all in?
Well, he is playing football, right? He did come back, right?
He came back at a very reasonable number.
I had not, I'll be totally honest, I hadn't even thought of the idea that it was just a bluff. If it was just a bluff, like that they were never actually really planning on trading him, then that's a really, I think, interesting and potentially savvy move. If it was not just a bluff and they were considering it, see, your point is well taken that every guy, they always move on early instead of late. What I'm curious about and what I'd like your guys' opinion on is, if you were running the Pats, would your I'd rather be early than late philosophy change at all when you know you only have a few years left of Brady?
This is what I'm going to do if I'm running the Pats. I go to Bill Belichick, say, hey, Bill, I'm running the Pats. You know what we're doing? Everything you say, bro. All right? That's what I'm going to do. So we always try to figure out what New England's going to do. In the last 10 years, Nick, what is the worst offense they've put on the field?
They've had top 5 offense every year this decade.
Oh.
Every year this decade.
So this is what I'm going to tell you. Even if they would have shipped Gronk off, Bill Belichick, what leads to his greatness is, no, I'm not a great defensive genius only. All right? He's gone over and allowed them to throw the football, to manipulate defenses. That's what's made him great, being a top 5 offense the last 10 years. So us sitting around thinking New England's not going to have no one on the offense. No, we're very, very naive to the greatest football coach that we've ever seen. He's going to have some offense. That's how he's won.
And Bill has drafted a lot of tight ends and a lot of successful tight ends over the years. We're talking about a trade possibly before the draft, so who knows what that compensation would have been. Plus, you would have gained more money from a salary cap perspective. So it's hard to know what that would have translated into should it go through.
Absolutely. We don't know.
And just one other thing on trades. Sometimes trades get to the point where you go into it and you're not really looking to trade someone, but then the offer gets so good that you have no choice but to say, all right, this is the best long-term thing for our organization.
And for years, people have, myself included, have said, man, the Pats need to maximize Brady's window, whatever's left. And a couple years ago, I thought they were finally doing it when they were trading away a first-round pick for Brandon Cooks, when they were spending that money on Stephon Gilmore. It seemed like they recognized Brady only has so many more years left. That's why it would have been surprising to me, even given their track record, if they would have traded away the best tight end in football in Brady's age 41 season.
I thought they was going to struggle when they lost Hernandez. I thought they were going to struggle when they lost Randy Moss. I thought they were going to struggle when they lost Wes Welker. Ever since then, what have they done?
Not struggle.
Keep winning. All right, take a break. Coach, stick around. Coming up, will the Steelers win last night, solve all of their problems? It's next on First Things First. Here at First Things First with Coach Mangini. Steelers hosting the Bucs last night. Steelers looking for their first win. Bucs trying to avoid their first loss. Not easy when Ben Roethlisberger is on his game. Big Ben was lights out, completing 30 of his 38 passes for 353 yards and 3 touchdowns. Ryan Fitzpatrick, he had a tale of 2 halves. He was great in the first, Not as great in the first, pretty good in the second. His third straight game of at least 400 passing yards, but he also had 3 costly interceptions. Steelers walk away with their first win on the year.
You know what, we always say winning cures a lot of things, but I still think the biggest issue, if you will, was outside the locker room, people perceiving different things. I'm not saying we don't have issues. All teams have issues, and there's different things going on, but I think it was a little bigger than people probably than it really is.
We put ourselves in a bad spot, and they did a great job creating and forcing the turnovers. But you know, for us, it was let's just go out there and play. You know, let's go out there and play and see what happens. And you know, we did that. We gave ourselves a chance, but weren't able to finish it.
All right, Coach, let's start with the Steelers side. What did you learn about this team being able to hold off the Bucs comeback?
Well, looking at the Steelers over the years, and especially last year, this team's not that different than what we saw last season. Last year they started 2-1. They ended up losing their third game of the season to Chicago, and everybody was worried about where they were. Fifth game, they had problems. That they typically don't start fast. And the only difference between this year and last year is the tie versus the Browns instead of the win against the Browns. I really liked what Vance McDonald did. You know, Vance is a player I've known for a long time from San Francisco. But them being able to incorporate the tight ends as effectively as they're starting to, I think, is huge for this offense because it helps Antonio Brown, helps Juju Smith. It helps everything work that much better. So I was excited to see that. The fact that they were able to force the turnovers that they did in the first half, that was a positive step for them as well. This team tends to build as the season goes on, and it looks like it's looked in the past.
The passing game looks excellent. The offense, because the passing game's been so good, it hasn't really mattered that much. Last couple weeks, they haven't had a super effective running game. James Conner, after that first awesome week, he's 23 carries for 78 yards, but they're scoring a ton of points. They scored 37 against Kansas City. They scored 30 last night. The offense been fine. There's right now, I would say 2 issues with the team. One is the defense as a whole. The last couple weeks has not been able to get stops, particularly through the air. And the other one is very odd for a Mike Tomlin team, the penalties. They had only, in his 11 years leading up to this year, they'd only been top 10 in the NFL one time. This year, they're first with a bullet. As a head coach, how much of being a highly penalized team is on the head coach? How much of it is on just the small sample size bad luck beginning of the season? Like, how much would you lay at Tomlin's feet? Because he was getting a lot of criticism during the broadcast and during the week about how highly penalized they were before the game. And then during the game, they had, what, a dozen penalties?
So the stat that you gave earlier about penalties, where did Tomlin rank over the last 10 years?
He's only been in the top 10 once in 11 years. They've never been a highly penalized team.
Okay, so those other 10 years, are we going to give him credit for only being?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
I think that Tomlin hasn't changed his philosophy in terms of penalties or the way that he handles penalties, and he's shown a track record to be very efficient and good in that area. Do I think that he's happy with where they are? No, of course he's not happy with where they are. Do I think he's going to stay pat and accept those penalties? No, he definitely isn't. It's a priority. It obviously has been a priority because he's been so successful with it, and I'm sure he's addressing it consistently. Do you sometimes get those penalties in bunches? Yeah. Now how you address them, and if some guys are getting them too often, you may have to sit them down and play somebody else.
Yeah, I'm concerned about their defense. We'll always talk about their offense. They have the big stars on offense, but this is not Pittsburgh Steelers-like, giving up the number of big plays, not being able to hold a 20-point lead. And at the end of the game, Tampa Bay, we could have easily been talking about, man, the Pittsburgh Steelers lost this game after having a 20-point lead. Secondary, I'm concerned about it. Artie Burns on the right side, you can see that Tampa Bay has been targeting him. Teams have been targeting him since he came into the league, 2016 from University of Miami, a first-round pick. So typically they get great results out of their draft capital. They're not getting that in the secondary, and that's been a problem.
Are you happy enough and confident enough with their offense to be able to withstand whatever they take and whatever the holes they have on their defense?
I was on a great, prolific offense. They weren't better than our offense, and we 2 times did not score 30 points in the season.
Both.
And we lost both of those games. One, week number 8 in Tampa Bay. We lost to the Tony Dungy and the Warren Sapp, John Lynch team. And then we lost to the Atlanta Falcons during the Dirty Bird NFC Championship when we failed to score 30 points. So you can win a lot of games, but it's hard to win a championship.
And in fairness to them, though, they have played Tampa, he's hung 400 yards on all three teams that he played. Kansas City, they're pretty explosive as well. Does that give them a bye or an excuse? No, not at all. They need to find out who they are this year. And he's changed a lot of things over time with the Steelers' defense. For years, the Steelers were always a zone blitz, multiple zone blitz, primarily 8-in-the-box team. He's incorporated more man-to-man. Mike Tomlin, he's incorporated more cover 2. Those things have never been part of the system. So as you bring that in, as you continue to address that, now what's the balance? What's the balance of what they used to do versus what they want to do or move to?
And the way last night's game ended was critical because, as you mentioned, we could be sitting here talking about Tampa Bay having their first 17-point comeback in franchise history. The Steelers, you mentioned it earlier, haven't blown a 20-point second-half lead in the history of their franchise. I think what you said, and if that's how last night's game ended, if they couldn't put it away on the ground, James Conner, after having a relatively ineffective game, had a big run late. Big Ben had a big completion late. They could take knees. If the Steelers lost today, it's total panic time. Like, that is how quickly things can change. Like, now you look at it, you're like, okay, we thought we'd be 2-1 through a tough opening 3 games, right? A road game in Tampa, road game against a better Cleveland team, home game against Kansas City. We're 1-1-1. Like, we're a half game worse than what we probably would have expected. We haven't had Le'Veon Bell. You can deal with it where they are right now. They play Baltimore. I think it's Sunday Night Football this coming weekend. They win that game, they're probably going to be in first place in the division after the first quarter of the season. But if the last few minutes of last night's game had gone the other way, you're panicking in Pittsburgh. But that's almost the nature of this league, right? Like that, if a lot of teams that it's the Raiders. The Raiders have led through 3 quarters every game this year, and they've lost every game this year. Like the little moments at the end is why we're talking about
the one thing that Ben mentioned in the press conference after the game, that yes, all families have issues, yes, but all families don't have a child that don't want to be in their house, and that's where L. Bell is. All right, they drafted him, they decided to franchise him, not once, but twice. All right? There's no other team that has even Earl Thomas. He kicked and screamed, but he playing football. Now, maybe not on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, not too much practice. So when Ben talks about, this is normal, no, it's not normal, Ben. They keep trying to put that on us. Oh, it's people outside. No, Ben, you have someone who doesn't want to be there. He's not happy being there. He's one of the best players. All right, and it affects your ball club. So that's what the truth is in Pittsburgh. They're not playing up to their expectations. As Coach said, they get a slow start. They can get it turned around with a win against Baltimore.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.